All right. So hi, everyone. Welcome to the Disabled Archaeologists Network Professional Development Panel on the subject of self-care in the field. I'm Laura Heath-Stout. I'm a member of the leadership team of the Disabled Archaeologists Network. And so in a moment, I'll introduce our panelists, but I want to let you know a little bit about the format here of what we're doing. We've thought about some of the topics and questions we'd like to address. And so I have a couple of questions to get us started, and then we'll open it up to questions from participants or audience members. You are welcome to write questions in the chat. If you would like to ask a question anonymously, you can send a private chat just to me, and I will read it out loud and not say who sent it to me. You can also use once we open it up for questions, please feel free to use the raise hand function to let us know that you have a question. This is the second in our series. We're hoping to have some others coming up either sort of early summer or in the fall. Some upcoming topics that are currently in planning stages are discussion of applying to graduate school and what that process looks like. That will include both current graduate students and at least one faculty member who's been on the admissions side of graduate school applications. And we also are planning to have a panel discussion about finding a mentor and finding mentees and developing strong mentor-mentee relationships. So that's sort of what's coming up in this series. So keep an eye out for that. If you are not already part of the Disabled Archaeologists Network, I'm putting our link in the chat. There's a membership form that's linked at the bottom. And if you're a non-disabled person, we ask that you don't become a member, but we do have a friends listserv. So if you're interested in hearing about our events that are open to all, regardless of disability identity, you can contact the Disabled Archaeologists Network. Our email address is on the website, and we will add you to that friends list so you can hear about future events. So I will introduce our two panelists and then we can get started. Maureen's camera is on at the moment, so I will start with her. Maureen Meyers is a senior archaeologist with New South Associates. She has over 30 years of experience in Southeastern US archaeology, with a focus on Mississippian period households, frontiers, fiber production, and ceramics. She also studies the contact period Westo group in Virginia and South Carolina. Her third research focus is on sexual harassment in the field, where she oversaw a survey of sexual harassment for Southeastern archaeology in 2014. More recently, she has published on disability in archaeology and has a forthcoming edited volume on inclusivity in archaeology. She's worked for multiple CRM firms and museums and taught for 8 years at the University of Mississippi. She's also served on the SAA Ethics Task Force as SEAC President and Executive Officer 1, and currently serves on an SAA Task Force on Employment. So welcome, Maureen. And then our other panelist is Humphreys. He's the founder and CEO of American Veterans Archaeological Recovery, or AVAR, a program that provides American military veterans with a supported opportunity to excel in archaeological fieldwork. Since 2016, he has directed or facilitated 20 field projects for veterans. And although the AVAR program focuses on the strengths veterans bring to the field, the majority of program participants have a disability rating from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Stephen is a veteran, having been commissioned into the U.S. Air Force following his completion of a BA in history at the University of North Texas in 2004. He holds a PhD in archaeology from Durham University, as well as an MA in archaeology and biblical studies, and an MA in theology from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. He's a National Geographic explorer and a dedicated field archaeologist with dig experience in Israel, Jordan, Cyprus, the UK, Sicily, and the USA. He's the foremost proponent and developer of the rehabilitation archaeology concept in the United States and is actively researching the mental and physical impact on field archaeologists. So welcome, Stephen. And then I'll introduce myself. I am currently, for about 2 more weeks, a lecturer in the writing program at Brandeis University, and will be starting in the fall, will be a postdoc in the Archaeology Center at Stanford University. I use mixed social science methods to study the demographics and knowledge production of archaeology as a discipline, and to advocate for a more inclusive and rigorous archaeology. My book is forthcoming, hopefully in 2024, from Routledge, and I'm a member of the Dan leadership team. Although my research in recent years has involved a lot of asking archaeologists about their feelings more than actually digging, I have fairly extensive fieldwork experience, mostly in Latin America, and generally on digs run by either academics or the Mexican government rather than CRM companies. So we hope that between the 3 of us, we provide not only different sort of experiences with disability, but also a variety of different kinds of fieldwork experience. And so I wanted to start just by well, so I'd originally planned to start by saying to tell us a bit about your fieldwork experience and where in the world you've worked, what kinds of projects, but then my fellow panelists really worked that into their bios. So I think we can sort of start with thinking about sort of how, what your experience is with taking care of medical needs in the field. So I'm envisioning self-care as broader than just sort of dealing with the medical aspects of disability, but taking care of our medical needs is a major theme for disabled archaeologists. So I'll open it up to the other panelists in a moment, but I think I can start by saying that when I was doing more typical field work, my main needs around disability were, well, so the main one was just having the medications I needed in the field. I'm on prescription medications that I have to take every day in order to be well. And this was a real problem in graduate school because my graduate student health insurance would only give me 30 pills at a time, which was ridiculous. One of my medications I've been on since I was 2 weeks old and will be on till I die. I'm not going to just stop needing it next month. And so what I found that worked for that was I would go to the pharmacy a couple of weeks before I went to the field and talk to a pharmacist and explain to them that I would be, for example, in rural Mexico on these dates, and that I understood that my refill would run out at this time, and could I have however many more months, and they would call the insurance company, and then the insurance company would call my doctor, and that was sort of the order, and then the insurance company would generally approve it. But me calling the insurance company did not get anywhere, but the pharmacist calling the insurance company got somewhere. So that was and my doctor, the pharmacist, had to be the one to call the insurance company. So that's a piece of wisdom I can share, but don't leave it till the last minute. I know many of us have similar situations. And then I also have a medical device that I use at night when I'm sleeping where I need electricity and distilled water. And so I didn't have the disability consciousness I have now when last time I was doing field work in remote locations. But now I hope that I would talk to field directors about the living space form of accommodations in advance, and sort of talk to them about whether I would have electricity, if not by default, how we could make that work, where I could get distilled water for my machine and all of that. And so just based on my own experience with my sort of physical needs around my disabilities, I think my main advice for others would be to talk to pharmacists as soon as possible about that kind of thing, and then talk to whoever's arranging housing in the field as soon as possible about what I need to sleep appropriately so that I can be well and also work in a rested way. But yeah, so I know Maureen has written some about this, but Maureen, would you be willing to talk to us about your experience or taking care of your medical needs in the field?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm a type 1 diabetic. I use an insulin pump, which is here, always attached to me. And then there's also a sensor. So there's two things. There's this tubing here that attaches and it has to be changed out every 3 days. It's sort of like a catheter. The whole thing comes out and then you put a whole new set in. And then the sensor is changed every 6 days because why sync those? It would just be too easy. So it's actually now it's every 7 days or so. And actually today's my sensor day. And I just changed it out actually here. And so that goes in a separate section and that all has to be taped down. Actually, both of them are taped down. So this holds, like I said, 3 days of insulin actually in this little tubing. And it's about to be changed out as well. So my main needs are, I mean, the basic one is insulin, right? I have to have that. If the pump, for some reason malfunctions, which has happened in the field and out of the field and at SAA meetings, then I will very quickly have a high blood sugar. In fact, quicker than even most diabetics. So within about 2 hours, I'll be in ketoacidosis and will need to go to the hospital. Fun story, SAA 2015, being taken out of the airport in an ambulance, really great fun times. So keeping that insulin needs to be kept cold. It actually works. It's easier for me to use if it's kept cool rather than in the refrigerator, but for long-term storage, it needs to be refrigerated. And so that's one issue in the field is just making sure it's refrigerated. If the field house is close by, or the hotel, I'm okay leaving the insulin behind. If it's not that close by, if it's a remote location, then I've got to have a way, and I do have special things that keep that insulin cold, so it's with me all day long. I always bring backup supplies, so the set can malfunction. If you're sweating or in a hot environment, it can come out very easily. I have backup tapes. I always have backup sets. And then I have backups to the backup sets because what I didn't mention is I also have some anxiety and depression. So I take anxiety meds, and they go hand in hand with diabetes. And so I often have backups of backups of backups. The sensor too, which costs $100 a sensor. So every 6 days, that sensor is replaced 7 days. And that's $100. So you want to be careful with those. So that's a main thing. And then I also have to test my blood sugar 2 to 4 times a day. So I always have test strips and glucometers and a backup glucometer. Those are rather small. And then I use glucagon in case my blood sugar goes the other direction, which is very low. But I also always keep juice packs with me. They're pretty handy and easy to take along. I'm used to drinking them warm. And some kind of sugar. There's also glucose tablets. I don't care for those. And then explaining to folks around me what's going on, I think for me is very important. But when I was a student or not in let's say a position of power leadership, that meant sitting down with whoever was running the project and explaining my needs. As someone who has now run field schools or runs field projects, that means explaining to the crew the basics. I don't want to overload them with information, but I also say, you're welcome to ask any questions. But then say if I have a crew chief, I show them what to do in case of an emergency. Batteries are also really important. So the sensor charger and the pump itself and the glucometer all take separate, different, very specific kinds of batteries. So that has to be, I have to make sure that's there. And then I always take syringes because the pump may malfunction. So I'm going to have to move to manual injections, which gets a little complicated because the kind of insulin I use in the pump is immediate acting. And so it's going to run out in about 4 hours. So I always bring a backup type of insulin or a prescription for it of long acting insulin, which allows me to sleep through the night without having to wake up and take an injection. And so there are a lot of like different pieces that I have to think about. Speaking in your note about prescriptions, for me, one way that I found around that 30-day limit is to work with my doctor if they're willing, to write a prescription for both the test strips for the glucometer and the insulin itself, for more than I normally take. So I normally take about 25 units of insulin a day. I have them write the prescription for insulin, so it's more like I take 40 units a day, and I always have extra insulin. And so that's, and then you know, I test. I'm obligated to test 2 times a day for the machine. And some days it's more if something malfunctions. So I just say, you know what, just write down that I test 6 times a day. And so then I always have backup test strips. Taking all this with me on any trip often necessitates like an extra bag or suitcase that I tend to, if I'm in a plane, that's going to go with me. I mean, I don't tend to check my luggage anymore anyway, but that's going to be with me and is going to be the thing that I grab when I go. I'm trying to think, there was, a health and safety form is something I learned in CRM. And I think that's really important just in general for everybody, right? We should all know where the hospital is and how to get there and how to contact somebody, you know, quickly. Cell phones, I think, or some kind of way to contact, you know, an ambulance if you need that pretty quickly is important. But it does take, as you said, a lot of pre-planning and just making sure and trying to think through just situations. You know, what if I'm in the field and this you know, doesn't work? How much time do I have? Who can I contact? And while I don't work in foreign countries, and one of the main reasons is my diabetes. I did work for many years in a very rural area of Appalachia, and had to use their hospital. And the doctor just said, "Look, I don't know about anything that you're using. You know about it." And he was willing to allow me to do what I needed to do while supporting me. But there's no guarantee of that. Or, you know, I've had to have a backup. That's another thing. I take a backup pump, but like a replacement pump sent from the company to a National Forest Service office and have somebody there who had to sign for it while I'm in the field. So it's, you know, working out logistics like that is tricky. So, yeah.
Yeah, it feels unfair, sort of, that all this planning has to happen. Like, that's a huge amount of work to figure all that out, and money and logistics and all of that. But I think it is what is necessary to keep a lot of us well in the field. Stephen, do you want to jump in and talk about taking care of medical needs in the field?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have anxiety, so I deal with that as well on my own for myself. But you know, first I want to foot stomp the need for a medical plan and for that to be disseminated through the team. Maureen just talked about that. The last thing you want to do if something's just gone wrong in the field is be frantically searching for phone numbers or frantically trying to figure out where to go to the hospital. And that's what that form's supposed to address. Everyone knows then, you know, okay, if this happens, I'm going to call this number. On the projects that we run, especially overseas, we have kind of our team leads actually do that route to the hospital from the site the first day, so that they've already driven that, so that if there's any weird problems that are going to pop up, like maybe something's under construction and that's not reflected on Google Maps, you know, those types of things can really cause your stress level to skyrocket if they pop up when you really need to get there. So, you know, I think that's really critical. AVAR does a mental and physical health screen before we put people on projects, and you know, that catches issues. It definitely allows us to better tailor the people to the project, so to speak. But another thing that I think has come up from all of us is taking personal responsibility for the issues that we individually have. You know your own issues better than, you know, those archaeologists on the site. Even if there is a medic on the site, you know exactly what you need. And I think what we as a program are trying to do better and better is build trust and rapport with those individuals that we're bringing on, so that they're comfortable bringing everything up. You know, problems that we've had in the field in the past have usually been around someone not putting something onto their medical form that they need because they thought it was unimportant, or maybe because they were, you know, afraid to share that information. And, you know, that can cause problems all of a sudden when you get them out in the field. But I think even with these measures that we have in place, really what it comes down to is getting that person onto a field project in the first place and seeing, okay, how do your unique needs intersect with field work? Because the devil is really in the details on these things. I mean, very minor changes in diet and in work situations and in social situations can have serious repercussions on people. So you really want to put them in, for people with disabilities, you really want to put them in kind of or we do anyway, a relatively mild field environment first, so they can try it out and see how those needs are going to intersect, so that the next time they go for a field project, they can really clearly communicate, this is what I need to be successful in this environment. You know, this is what I need to bring with me. Maureen, you know, has just talked about how she briefs crew chiefs on, this is what you need to do if I have these issues. We want our folks to be able to communicate their needs so that we can actually take care of them, because we want to. It's just, you know, you have to know what they need so that you can do that.
Yeah, and I think that that brings up a lot of the research that I've done interviewing disabled archaeologists, especially with early career people there, and with people who's have the option of whether or not to disclose. There can be a lot of concern about disclosure. So I think what you're saying, Stephen, about the building the rapport and the trust, that like that sometimes this information needs to be disclosed in order to help, you know, take care of people in the field, but that it's not going to be like that we're working to not be ableist, that it's
Yes.
to create a space where it's actually safe to disclose, because a lot of people feel unsafe disclosing for the people who can sort of pass. Of course, there are also people who have no choice.
And that's why sometimes like we do that lighter field project, because sometimes that rapport doesn't come up until you're in the field and that person has a minor issue. And it's like, okay, you guys are going to take care of me. You're not just going to boot me off and kick me home again. You know, you're actually going to care about that concern, but you know, you want them to be in a situation where that doesn't have catastrophic ramifications the very first time it happens.
Yeah. And I think that, thinking about, encouraging people who were students or mentees to start with a field project that is where maybe the whatever the physical conditions are maybe less of a concern, and also like perhaps less remote from medical care, or depending on their situation, may sometimes before going on that especially remote or especially physically difficult project, I think can make a lot of sense. Although of course we know that there are concerns, like telling a student to like first go on one field school and then go on another or something like that can be prohibitively expensive, but it's definitely something to consider for folks who are have mentorship relationships with people who may have medical, maybe more likely to have a medical situation in the field. Although of course non-disabled people have medical issues in the field too. It's not one time I was hospitalized in field work was because I was a 15-year-old who didn't drink enough water and didn't and had heat stroke, and it had nothing to do with my ongoing medical conditions in any way, as far as I know. So so I think that these things are also being aware of these issues, and resources, and what to do in case of medical crisis is important for everyone. So I'm curious for Stephen. So I know that AVAR has a lot of systems in place to help participants take care of themselves in the field, and so I'm curious if there are any of the any suggestions that you have of like what those of us who aren't going on your projects can learn from that, both about how to structure a project, but also if there's anything that like an individual fieldwork participant could replicate, or if it's all really structural.
So, we do have, tips and tricks, because like this rehabilitation archaeology concept really is the adaptation of field work. So, things that we're doing in the field need to change at every level. But one thing that I wanted to mention on this that we've started using just this year on a couple of projects, we call it MAPS, the Modular Archaeological Progression System. It is a workbook that we have every participant go through. They're guided by a peer supporter that we have on our team. We call it that person, a crew support specialist. And that's structural, and I'm going to talk over and over probably about resourcing these types of things. But like this MAPS workbook really takes people through questions related to their technical ability, their teamwork or socialization, as well as their physical and mental health. We have different blocks that address different challenges they face during the fieldwork process. So like the questions about coming onto the fieldwork process are coming onto the fieldwork program are different than the questions, 3 weeks in. And it really just allows the participant, again, to kind of think through their own needs, and also think through what everyone else on the project needs. So it does help them, I think, to be a little bit more oriented toward the well-being of the entire group. One thing that we noticed from observing our project as well as other projects is as you bring people on projects, their technical abilities tend to improve over time. Obviously, they're getting more and more practice. They become better excavators, surveyors, whatever. But when you come to these other categories, mental health, physical health, and teamwork, we saw that people sometimes deteriorated over time. They lose those abilities. And, one easy example is for those of you who have done a lot of projects, your first projects, they're like summer camp, you're happy. It's like a big extended family. Everyone loves everyone else. After you've been in the field for 10 or 15 or 20 years, you don't see those relationships forming anymore, especially among like leaderships on projects. They don't have like this super tight bond. They tend to be kind of loners in a lot of cases. So we're wondering like what's happening in between that initial burst of socialization where everyone's very oriented around everyone else and that management position, what's happening in the middle. So we wanted to create a project where people would retain that empathy and that compassion toward other people on the team, and where we could encourage them to do that, because those relationships between them are really more impactful in a lot of cases than anything the staff can do. If people are taking care of each other on the projects, that's really about 90% of your experience on that dig. So yeah, I think having this tool where everyone's going through it, it's consistent support for the entire team. That's really helped us a lot. And again, we do have the mental health clinician and the occupational therapist as well for people to talk to, but I realize not everyone's going to have that, those options. I do want to put out there that we're really looking into making those resources that we have available on a much broader level, because we realize that the whole field needs those things, and that we're generating this, this capability within our program of mental health clinicians who know what fieldwork looks like and can deal with fieldwork's unique stressors. So, if people are interested in kind of using our resources for their programs, I'm really happy to talk about that, kind of offline and see how we might be able to generate something where we're outsourcing, or we're outsourcing.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, and so we've been talking some about mostly about physical health. Mental and emotional health have come up a little bit here, but I'm curious if either of you have thoughts about what you do to take care of your emotional health in the field beyond having those backups that Maureen talked about as a sort of reassurance. I think for me, one of my main things is, so a couple of things are really making sure that I'm able to keep in touch with loved ones at home. Sometimes field communities can feel like a pressure cooker, where you're like, if you have conflict with someone in the field, or I don't know, it can feel very insular. And so just finding out in advance what if any internet access there is, phone access there is, and then budgeting for that. I remember one summer in Belize, I was in a town where at that time there was one landline phone in the town, and you had to buy phone cards to use it, and then it was in somebody's house, and you would go ask for the phone and they would pass it through the window, and you'd sit on their front steps and call your people, which was very concerning for me as a closeted person who was calling my girlfriend. I was like, oh, how much English do the folks in the house speak, and are they like listening? But I budgeted for phone cards. I knew that phone cards were going to be important, and so I found out, and so keeping in touch with people from home. I know internet access is becoming more and more widely available, but then also for me, bringing books with me to the field to read has been really important. Both reading fiction is one of my self-care strategies in general, but it also allows me, like, when I need to take a break from other people, like being like, oh, I'm gonna go read my book is like not just sort of a normal thing to do. It provides just my options aren't like sit alone somewhere doing nothing or be with people all the time. And I need that alone time in order to be well. So just sort of planning ahead to be able to have a book to escape into has been really important for me. But yeah, do either of you have thoughts about what you do to take care of yourself, or what you've seen others do to take care of yourself emotionally and mentally?
Yeah, I for me, like, I'm trying to think. It was again, it's I've held so many different roles. It's kind of, I'm trying to think. When I did CRM and was sent to the field a lot, it was very similar. So music was really important. I didn't mind being, driving a far away to a project, because music really kind of was a good transition kind of thing for me. Books definitely, and calling, I would call every day, spouse and then children later on when we had them. And although sometimes I got to say, like, it's one thing to call your spouse. It's another thing when your spouse has young children and you're calling from the field, and that actually can add to some stress. It can be kind of difficult, especially when, like, you don't, I mean, I remember standing, like, walking around a hillside trying to get a signal, right, in Southwest Virginia. And your spouse is like, saying things like, hey, remember the woman we hired to watch our kid for the summer? They just quit. And you're like, okay, I can't do much for that right now, right? So I think juggling that. And so in terms of that, like, knowing, okay, we're going to call every day, but I'm going to make sure I'm in a good place mentally, and putting my stuff aside and being there for the spouse. But that gets kind of hard too. And then I would say too, like, when I was running field schools through the university, it was a lot. We were away for 4 weeks. A lot of the students hadn't actually gone a whole lot of places. And I was in charge of things. So I made a big point of, after hours, we had to do certain things like wash artifacts while we all took turns showering. But after dinner, it was like, you're on your own. And I made sure I was on my own. So I would read books, or I had shows I would sort of save up on Netflix because we had internet that I could watch. And just get off by myself, go have some coffee. And on the weekends, I usually went to a friend's house, 2 hours away. And if I couldn't do that, I found places in town. I knew people in town, and just to kind of get away, and I think one of the problems that I ran into, that a lot of people run into, is there's going to be someone on the crew you just don't gel with, right? They really annoy you a lot. And even as someone teaching a field school, there's going to be someone on the field school that really annoys you a lot. And you don't want that to, as a teacher, you don't want that to escalate, but just in general, you don't want that to escalate. And so I think I had to learn a very hard way over time that it's just really good to just walk away, right? And now I do a lot of meditation and meditative breathing, and I wish I'd had those as tools, because I think I would have dealt with it. I mean, there's some stories of me in the field of losing my cool, and I'm not proud of those. I'm not happy with those, but I think it's something you learn along the way, and also realizing this is a temporary situation. It's really cool to go do archaeology, and also acknowledging it's really difficult. It's a difficult, uncomfortable, maybe you signed up, and I've had people say to me, I like archaeology, I just don't like field work. And I'm afraid to say that because, I'm afraid that doesn't make me a real archaeologist. And I get that. And I think we want to get across the understanding that there's a lot of ways to do archaeology, and field work's just one of them.
Yeah, I'll I'll jump in. I think I really appreciate the point about there's always just someone that rubs you the wrong way. And it's not necessarily that you're bad or that they're bad. It's just there's always some kind of conflict, and you're living too close together for too long of a time, and you're both really tired. So I think for me, anyone that's been on any of our projects knows that I'm like a compulsive walker. I just and that's how I mentor. So I'll grab staff members and whatnot at like 8 o'clock at night, and we'll just walk miles around whatever facility that we're in. I think one night in Sicily, my team walked 13 miles after doing field work. So I walk very fast. And that's part of that is the anxiety coming through. I'm also a compulsive pacer. That's just an anxious trait. But so that's kind of what I do. But on that programmatic level, having staff and having enough people around you that have different areas of expertise that you need is so critical. I mean, I remember the first ABAR projects was in 2016. We didn't have adequate resources. We were partnered up with the British Hop Nightingale program at that time, you know, and they operated differently than we do now. And we initially had that model. And I remember the three of us that were kind of running that project, you know, three veterans, and we were trying really hard to take care of the team. And of course, we're running the archaeology as well. And at the end of 3 weeks, like we just all had like 1,000-yard stares, because you're running archaeology all day and you're trying to take care of people all evening, and you've got no time to yourself. And, you know, yeah, it's just, it creates an environment where you're not really able to achieve your job. You're not really able to function anymore. So what's been probably most beneficial for my mental health and my self-care is actually hiring on people to where I can be like, okay, I ran the archaeology all day. I talked to press twice. You know, I've got this personnel situation. That's your job. You need to take care of that. Not because I don't love that person. I love that person, which is why I've hired you to do that job, and why I've trained you to do that job. So you go take care of them this evening. You know, being able to do that and go on that walk or read that book or whatever is how we maintain a consistent level of function throughout the project. So you do have to have the mental health staff, the physical health staff that can take care of those issues, because otherwise you're just doing too much.
Yeah, I totally, you know, when my first field school that I ran, it felt like people were asking me questions from the moment I opened my eyes till the moment I went to bed, right? And there were questions as diverse as, where do I go to the bathroom, to, you know, how do you want this recorded? Do you want this saved? You know, it was just like, and, you know, what are we going to have for dinner? It felt like there were both children and students, and it just was insane.
Yeah.
So I totally, yeah, it's just so much. And so I think I totally agree, you know, being able to, you know, once I was able to get graduate students and then see, my big thing in the field is everybody's got to do everything. And then I'm going to see what your strengths are. You got 2 weeks to, you know, to learn all the basics. And then we're really going to get down to it. You like mapping, that makes you happy. That makes me happy. You go map, right? You like doing, you know, the total station. Great. You know? And so being able to delegate, I think and I think that's also a thing that, you know, when you start in archaeology, it's just, you're kind of told you've got to learn it all. And you think in a student mindset, eventually, if you stick around in archaeology, you're going to be a leader, right? You're going to be running projects. And there's that transition I don't think we talk about enough, right? Where you need to start, you don't have to do everything. And you can admit, I don't know everything. I don't know the answer to your question. And, you know, honestly, I suck at the total station. I'm just gonna say it. I suck at the transit. I suck at the total station. Every time I go out, I need someone to redo it for me, re-show me. And then I just, you know, it's just something I admit, but I didn't want to admit that for years. Right. And so it's okay. Right. I'm really good at a lot of other things. And that's okay. And so now I've learned to just delegate. And sometimes I get the data I want, and sometimes I don't, but that's okay too. You know,
Yeah.
I think
I want to highlight, we just had a conversation about this last week. This is another one of the reasons that we wanted to kind of put a MAPS workbook together, is there is no, military veterans in particular are really used to like these leadership training classes that you take throughout your career. Archaeology doesn't have those. There's no point where you're like, okay, now I've transitioned from a worker bee to a leader. You just, all of a sudden someone's like, oh, I think you've got potential, or I just need someone to do this. And you're just like up jumped. And so I was just talking to my team like last week, and I was like, look, y'all need to find a leader in the field now, start watching them, seeing what they do, see what kind of leader you want to be. Because it's not like someone's going to take you aside and like knight you in the field and say you're a good like, there's no training class for this. You just all of a sudden are put in charge of stuff, and you need to be thinking of how you're going to do it now as you're starting, because it's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think too is that, God, that's such a great point. And what I started to learn is like, you know, I have a bunch of mentors, and I you know, official, unofficial, but it's like, okay, they're really good at this, and I want to learn this, but then recognizing later on, like, well, they kind of suck at that. So maybe they kind of suck at managing people. You can learn from bad people too, right? You know, I mean, if people have weaknesses, I learned that's a really bad way to run a field project. So I'm just going to do the opposite, right? And so you can learn that way too. But I think that's a great point. We don't have a way. We're trying to do that at New South, where we're trying to like yearly sit down and say, okay, these are the skills you need to have to be a crew chief. We'd like to promote you, but clearly you need more training in this. So we're going to talk again in 6 months after giving you that training, right? That's the way it should be done, probably. But yeah, we don't have that in archaeology. It's more like survival of the fittest.
Yeah, we were trying to build something like that a couple of years ago, and we kind of had it down. But again, you need resources to do it, and you need a culture that values promoting people that have leadership skills instead of just technical skills sometimes. So
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, this conversation is reminding me of watching a friend in graduate school during, I think it was like the last week of classes of the semester. So she had final papers coming up and she was a TA, so she had students about to take a final, and the director of the project she was going to work on that summer said like, okay, we have like X total budget for field equipment. You figure out which field equipment we can buy in country, which field equipment we need to bring, and like make a budget for how much we need of everything. And it was for a country she'd never been to. And she was like, I don't know if we can buy good trowels in this place. Like, I have no idea. And so I sort of like watched my friend have like, it was like really, really, really difficult emotionally for her. And so I was like, okay, can I like, we were TAs for the same class, and I was like, send some of your students to me, like what can we do here? But it was really just like that's the example that comes to mind of just like throwing someone into the deep end. And she wasn't a director, she wasn't like thrown into the deep end of being a director, but the director threw her into the deep end of like, here's this task that was just like impossible to do without the guidance. And that's the kind of thing that I think it could have been a great learning experience if he had said like, okay, we're going to do this together. Like, here's how I think about, here's how you figure out how many buckets you need for a project. Here's actually how we do that. And here's how we figure out, like, can we buy buckets in country or do we need to bring them? So I think that, and so then you think about like the consequences of throwing someone into the deep end that way is that then you maybe don't actually, first of all, that person arrives in the field already like totally stressed out by that experience, and then you may not have the equipment you need, which is not going to be good for either the archaeology or anyone's well-being. And then like people are blaming that person. So I think some of the self-care is also about like caring for each other and creating a project where people are like given appropriate responsibilities and support is going to be necessary for the well-being of everyone. And our current system of just like sink or swim is really not serving that. Yeah, so I want to open it up to questions. Do any of our audience members have a question? Like I said, you can private message me or just message everyone in the chat and I'll read out the question, or you can use the raise hand function and ask your question out loud. If not, we have more topics, but I'll give people a minute to. Yeah, Travis, do you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, first, just thank you all for talking so much about mental health stuff. Something that I've like encountered, and I know like a lot of like field techs I work with have encountered in CRM, is the limited access we kind of have to mental health professionals because we're so often like going to states we don't live in, and usually the people who we see for like therapy are, can only work, like provide, like even if it's telehealth, they can only provide it within the state you reside, just legally. So I'm wondering if you guys have like either ever brainstormed or thought about like ways, or if at New South you guys ever figured that kind of thing out. Currently at the company I work at, we have at least the like employee, like I forget what it's called, like an employee like mental health like thing that's just like a call them if you're having like a crazy crisis. But do you have any thoughts on that?
I have one thought, but let me go to Stephen first because he's the expert on this.
Well, this is the issue that we're trying to work around right now, and it limits the, what you would really call counseling that our mental health clinician can provide. So, we're often, I should say, constrained in being able to kind of provide a crisis intervention like you're kind of talking about. We're fortunate right now in the field work that I was just alluding to, the CRM work that we're doing, which is in Texas, because our mental health clinician is licensed in Texas. And, you know, that's where we're operating. So I think logistically, it's a solvable problem, but I think it really is going to require finding individuals where you're working that can actually provide that service.
Yeah, so the only reason I know something about this is because I'm married to a mental health therapist, which just comes in very handy, actually. So who's actually a specialist in OCD and trauma. And so recently, so he actually does telehealth ever since COVID. And even though we now live in Georgia, he's licensed in both Mississippi and Georgia, but right now all his clients are in Mississippi. And we run into this, or he does, in part because he sees a lot of students, and then the students go home for the summer and they're often living not in Mississippi. And so that limits how much, you know, so then they restart treatment, I guess, in the fall. But he said that recently the mental health association that he belongs to is really pushing for a multi-state, I'm not sure what to call it, but basically if you're licensed in one of the states that sign up to this, then you would be licensed to provide telehealth treatment to anybody else in those states. It's sort of like the universities do this, where certain universities like in the Southeast are in a coalition. And so you can take classes from any university in that coalition at in-state rates. And I've done that for field school. So it's the same kind of idea. And I think it's very close to coming into existence, because he'd like to sign up for that so that he can broaden who he provides treatments for. And I, you know, if I get more information on that, I'm happy to share that. But we were just talking about this the other day. So.
Yeah, I think one other thing I should mention is we have different models in our program of what kind of support we provide from the mental health clinician. So we, you know, can go remote, or we can have that person actually available there on site. And frankly, for some of the stuff that I've seen so far, like having that remote or that mental health clinician available on site is useful. For one thing, we don't think about it much, but like if you get to that crisis point and someone's actually reaching out, like you've really gone too far, that person really needs an issue or has an issue and needs a lot of help. The mental health clinician in the field, what they bring to the table is really being able to identify red flags way in advance of something going badly wrong, especially because their orientation is to watch for that. And the other, I mean, I promise, archaeologists do not watch for these issues. We're just not trained to do it. You know, we're looking at the ground, we're thinking sampling strategy, we're thinking collection, we're looking at our paperwork, all that kind of stuff. You're not looking at the people as much, and that mental health clinician is. So, you know, I think the direction the field might need to go in the future is actually having people with more training on field projects in person, in the same way that we have people with physical first aid and whatnot on projects in person.
You know, many years ago, I helped on a field school that had students from Gallaudet, so they were deaf, right? We had we all had to take, I was a crew chief, this was out Mount Vernon. All the crew chiefs had to take sign language, but there was no way, I mean, we were taking the course at night while we were teaching the field school during the day. So it was just really basic, right? And so we had an interpreter there, and I would think it's the same kind of need, right? It's the same kind of, you know, if you're going to have an interpreter for deaf field school students, then we should have somebody there for mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, the issue with that is like, it's the resourcing again. It's the, you know, whoever the contractor is, whoever the developer is or whatever, you know, why do you have a mental health clinician on your field team? So it's getting that paid for. And we're really fortunate because we work with people that see that need in our program. But, you know, I think that's the challenge the wider field's going to have to address is we're going to have to put money into this if we're going to take care of our people and increase retention and actually take care of folks.
Yeah, and even then, even with a mental health clinician in the field with you, it's not going to be the person that people have been seeing. Like you have ongoing therapeutic relationships, and so I wonder what the sort of transitions in and out of the field look like then. Like I wonder if so Stephen, if our participants have a chance to talk to that mental health clinician before they go to the field, or like when I've changed therapists, once when I yeah, when I like stopped going to therapy for a while and then saw a new therapist, I gave the new therapist and my former therapist permission to talk to each other. So in order to like let the older therapist get the new therapist caught up on not only paperwork things like what diagnoses to put on the insurance forms, but also, you know, things that she had learned about me that might be useful to the new therapist. And so I wonder if yeah, if there are possibilities for that kind of like coordination between the on-site person and someone who has an ongoing relationship with the participants.
Yeah, and I think, you know, our program strategy, we don't have a therapist that travels around with us. Let me rephrase that. We don't have a therapist that goes around with us whose explicit purpose is to provide ongoing support for everyone on every field project. In other words, you're not coming on ABAR projects to get therapy. We view the mental health professionals and the peer supporter we have on the project, that's very much a canary in the coal mine. You know, that person's role is to highlight issues that are happening before they really get acute and allow us to refer back to that, you know, that therapy provider, or set them up with a therapy provider back where they actually are, because they're only going to be with us realistically for a couple months or a couple weeks, maybe a couple months out of the year. So, you know, our role with our program is to solve issues in the field, to let them do field work. It's not to put them through our therapy program. Does that kind of make sense? And I think that's an important distinction, because originally, you know, and even with our program, people misunderstood that for a while. You know, they were like, oh, you're doing therapy. We're not doing therapy. We're doing archaeological field work. We're doing, you know, we're doing science. Their goal out there is to do good field work. We're just trying to support them through it. If they need more support back home, our goal is to get them that support back home, not to make them hooked on coming on our field work project.
Travis,
Thank
do
you.
you want to weigh in or have any follow-up questions?
I don't think I have follow-up questions. No, I think at the end of the day, it's probably like within CRM, it's probably more of those things of just like companies having to go after more like in-state work for where they have a lot of people. Because like at the end of the day, field techs are people who work, who if they want to make money, they're having to constantly be in the field.
Right.
So, and the only thing that I've done myself is figure out, I send out a field briefing before like field work. So I've just added into that field briefing the employee assistance program, like a mental health like hotline that the company provides for like anyone, regardless of like if they're on the company healthcare. That's the best solution I've come to it.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so there's another question in the chat that I'll read out loud. As someone of limited mobility, how does one really navigate the job search when employers often express a need for the ability to carry certain weights, walk distances, or climb stairs in their job descriptions, but also say that they're an equal opportunity employer? This is something I've known. I have been on the academic job market for about 5 years, with lots of one-year positions, and this is something I've noticed that I'm like, I don't think actually to be an archaeology professor I need to be able to climb stairs. I think you need to put I mean, I can climb stairs, so it's actually not a problem if my office or a classroom or whatever is in a building without an elevator, but yeah, it's something that I don't feel like I have a good answer for. Maureen or Stephen, do you have thoughts about this one?
I don't have a good answer either. I'm afraid to like say something that might legally be wrong. But I don't know. I don't know if employers, if they state that, if that negates, you know, by stating that up front, if that negates their requirement to hire disabled workers. I don't really know. But yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I did have, I'm not sure. I mean, you could just apply and then if hired, say, well, you know, under EEOC or you know, or under ADA, I think, you know, I'm disclosing this, and you know, but I don't know. I mean, they technically then legally they can't withdraw the job. But I don't know, but I think that is something that would be good legally to look into. I'm not I'm not sure that maybe, I would think maybe a future topic, Laura, would be good to address that. You know, and with an ADA lawyer, that would be actually, I would be interested myself. Technically, I mean, I never say that I can't do those things, but especially as I get older, and I've been a diabetic for 40 years, and it does take a toll. I'm physically, I am limited in what I can do as I get older. So I'm a little curious myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think having a sort of Q&A with an ADA lawyer would be a great future event for Dan, because I don't think yeah, I don't know. Steven, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I agree with Maureen in that, you know, you see something like that as an employee or a CEO in my case, and, you know, you just think, well, I need to have my lawyer look at this before I really give some kind of an answer that could potentially get you in trouble. I'll tell you, like, the point of the ABAR program is to put people in positions where they're really going to be able to blow away a potential employer, you know, or hire. And we're going to look at those. We're going to look at any physical concerns they have and say, okay, what's the best environment for you to be in? Like, is this going to is this going to damage you essentially, or is this going to increase your mental stress? If we're giving you your first steps into this world, like, is this really the best fit for you? You know, the legality of that, I'm honestly not sure of either. I'd like to have another follow-up panel on that when we're all better prepared for the question.
Yeah. And I would, if you did have a panel on that, I would have someone from ACRA there. I would want some business owners there to also address how they would, you know, to talk about how they would address that or how they have addressed it.
Yeah, I'm envisioning a panel with someone from ACRA, someone from a disability office at a university, and maybe someone in federal government, and an ADA lawyer to sort of talk about how these things work in all of those. It's sort of in all the spaces that that archaeologists are most commonly working. I mean, archaeologists work in all kinds of spaces, but I think that we could really bring people together to talk about archaeology jobs and sort of legal requirements and applications. And
let me add, you know, in my last job, 8 years at the University of Mississippi, I disclosed, you know, I filled out every year a form. Do you have a disability? Yes, I do. And they, you know, they count that. They want to count that to show that they're a diverse workplace. But I never got any offers of support. And I know that the work environment and the workload, well, I know because my doctor said, if you don't leave this job, it's going to kill you, right? And so I think I went in with this I think a lot of us have this idea that academia is somehow easier or more accommodating. It was not at all. And maybe that's because I don't look like I have a disability. And so they just kept taking more and more. And I've been a diabetic since 1981. I'm a well-controlled diabetic. And for the first time, because of a result of that job and harassment I experienced there, I had complications from diabetes that took a medical leave and a year or two of physical therapy to try to resolve. And I still have some of those complications, right? It takes a while to resolve a lot of that. So I think it's an issue in all of the field, all levels of the field, wherever we're working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just want to draw people's attention. Debbie just posted a PDF in the chat of it looks like a British publication on employing people with disabilities, good practice guidance for archaeologists. So thank you so much. Yeah, and she's posting some other resources, and I will send those out by email to everyone who registered for this event as well. So that you don't have to download them all right now. I will share them, but thank you so much, Debbie. Yeah, so we're out of time, so I'm going to close this, but I will definitely look into creating this panel that we've been envisioning. And I'm sorry, Dina, that we didn't have better answers to your question. Yes, thank you so much to Steven and Maureen for sharing your experiences and expertise here. And thank you to everyone for coming. Like I said, the recording of this event will be on the Disabled Archaeologists Network website. I'll put it up in the next few days. So if it's been helpful to you, or you'd like have someone you'd like to share it with, it will be there soon. Yes, so thank you very much to everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks very much.
Thank y'all. Thanks for moderating.
Yeah, sure. All right. I
Hey,
think it's just us left.
yeah,
Thank you so much. This was a great conversation, and yeah, I definitely want to create some kind of event that can provide more, like, not necessarily individualized legal advice, but more like
Right.
knowledge and expertise on the specific best practices and legal stuff.
So I wanted to add, like, within, just the panel group, like,
Yeah.
this is something that we've had to deal with a fair amount, because, if you say that you create a program that supports people, and